1, 2, 3, cut.
Hooray! This is called Centennial Yards, formerly the Gulch. And of course, this whole development was passed in 2018 by the Atlanta City Council. So this is one of the first pieces of development. There's about 15 different parcels that will eventually be developed over the next 10 to 15 years. So the first portion here is at Ted Turner Drive and Peter Street, which is in the Castleberry Hill neighborhood. And there's 162 apartments that have been rehabilitated to its natural historic beauty. So this is an old building that was probably built somewhere around 1910. There are studios and 1 and 2 bedroom apartments. So this development is actually the gateway to further development in Southwest Atlanta. Castleberry Hill has really been flourishing along with other areas in Southwest Atlanta. We're just very excited about the development that's happening in this area. It's going to anchor this end of the lower end of downtown Atlanta from Marietta Street, coming back to Castleberry Hill and going further southwest. So this is something that's very exciting, and we're looking forward to more development that will take place.
We're here today at the Maggie Russell Tower to help to provide, along with our partners GenCare and their Executive Director, Councilwoman Carmelita Gum from South Fulton, 80 COVID-19 vaccines for seniors who are here in the building. There are over 400 residences in the Maggie Russell high-rise, but there are about 80 folks who had not received their COVID-19 vaccines. So a lot of the seniors, aren't mobile, meaning they may not have a car or access to transportation, to help them to get vaccinated, to protect them and others who already have been vaccinated in the building from the scourge of COVID-19. It is still important to adhere to the CDC guidelines so that we can beat this pandemic. We are so close to the end of it. Millions of Americans adult Americans have been vaccinated, but we need every American to step up, get a shot in the arm, because it protects yourself, it protects others, it protects our community. The city of Atlanta is still in phase 2. We would like to open up. We can't do so until we have the results in the broader community that our infection rate is beneath 5%, that people are still wearing masks and socially distancing, that everybody is getting vaccinated. The more we do that, the quicker we can go back to normal.
We're out here downtown today celebrating the completion of 4 projects that were voted on during our Downtown Decides participatory budgeting process. And we're riding a bike from one location to the other to do a ribbon cutting in each of the 4 transportation projects. Some of the projects we're celebrating today are new bike lanes in the Central Business District, the painting of an island in the middle of the road yellow so people can see it, and some new trash cans in the Sweet Auburn corridor. This is the direct result of citizens participating in this program. This is the first time we've done participatory budgeting in Atlanta, and it puts the power directly in people's hands on how tax dollars are spent, and we're just thrilled with the response and the success of the program so far.
Chastain Park is the largest park in the city of Atlanta. This is the last piece of the Chastain Park path, and it's taken over 25 years since it began, and we are here at a groundbreaking to celebrate this last piece getting ready to start. The phrase, it takes a village, well, it certainly takes a village here. There have been lots and lots of organizations who have helped make this happen. I think there are over 500,000 people and probably about 250,000 dogs that use the path each year. It's an asset that is used by many, many people, from young people walking along to people on bikes to people running and exercising and folks coming after work to enjoy a stroll in the park. And the path has really been a catalyst for revitalizing the park, and so lots of park partners here today with NYO and the horse park and the pool, and it's a wonderful time to celebrate together.
Today we're here for an unveiling. We're unveiling an urban farm, one of the biggest urban farms that will be based here in District 3. And we're here to address the food insecurities that this district has faced for decades. And I think what's so innovative about this idea is that we've partnered with Washington High School, with Greenleaf Farms. We're going to be partnering with the American Heart Association to bring together an Ag STEM program that's going to cultivate new, young, fresh blood in urban farming that's going to really be focused on how we can move together as a community in addressing food insecurities within Atlanta. It is time that we take action in our own hands and we start cultivating innovative opportunities like an urban farm, like a grocery retail model where we can pipeline produce into the communities and really help lift up and support our residents.
This is our annual Eco Depot. We do this once a year out here at Charm. We used to do it at Turner Field, and we did it one year, the very first year we did it at the Civic Center. But this is an annual day where you can get rid of those unwanted, but the things that you know your gut says, don't throw this away, but I can't put it in the garbage and I can't put it in the city's recycling blue bin. So this is the Center for Hard to Recycle Materials. So people are out here today, they're bringing their styrofoam, they're bringing their tires. We've got neighborhood tires that are coming, where someone dumped them. We've got tires that are coming. All of your old electronics, just like when you have that old electric.
The time is now 10 a.m. on Wednesday, May 19th, 2021. And today we are starting day 5 of the City Council review of the Mayor's proposed fiscal year 22 municipal budget. I'm joined this morning by my Vice Chair, Howard Shook, of the Finance Executive Committee. I know this morning also we have Councilmember Joyce Shepard, Councilmember Marcy Collier Overstreet, and Councilmember Dustin Hillis. I believe some others are in the process of signing in, and council members will be cycling in and out through the budget hearings as their schedules permit. For today's schedule, we have City Planning at 10 a.m., Finance at 11, Law at noon, the American Federation of State, City, and Municipal Employees, AFSCME, at 1 p.m., and the Professional Association of City Employees, PACE, at 1:30 p.m. We're going to stick to those start times, so if one department finishes a little bit early, you'll just hear the line go quiet until the next start time, and I'm going to ask the departments to try not to run over so that we can stick to our schedule. Each department will start with giving a presentation and then allowing some time for questions and answers by council members at the close of their presentation. An electronic copy of the budget book and all presentations have been circulated to council members, and for the public, if you would like to follow along, go to the City Council website. Under Finance Executive Committee, there's a tab that says Proposed Fiscal Year 2022 Budget. And under there, you can find all of the presentations for today's departmental briefings, as well as the ones that we did earlier this week and last week. As I said, at the completion of each topic, council members will have the ability to ask questions. Colleagues, please send me a message through Teams or a text if you would like to speak, if you're able. Otherwise, I'll just ask for questions also. I believe we've been joined while I've been giving the introduction by Councilmember Antonio Brown as well. So for city planning, if you'll turn in your budget books to page 354 is the city planning budget pages. And colleagues, you should have been emailed the presentations if you want to, if you're not on Teams, if you want to have that in front of you. And with that, I am going to ask Commissioner Tim Keene. Welcome you this morning, Commissioner Keene. Ask you to introduce your team, and after you introduce your team, you can just jump right into your presentation. And we, I believe, still need to get Commissioner Keene on the line and off his mute. So if you'll just bear with me for a moment while we get the Department of Planning ready to go, we'll be right with you. Let's, can our tech team double check that Commissioner Keene is off mute? I think he's having some issues getting through. Make sure that he had the right number, but I'm hearing from him that he is trying to speak, but is on mute. All right, thank you for your patience, everybody. Let me, we are trying to get Commissioner Keene on the line, so one more minute, and I think that we'll get this. Yep, if you just dialed in, we are going to start the City of Planning presentation in just a few minutes. We're just having a few technical issues getting going. And I will ask, if you're not the speaker, if you could put your phone on mute during the presentation, that would be great so we don't get any feedback. If I could ask, well, here, Commissioner Keenan, I think you're trying to listen in. I'm going to send you the number and access code into the public. Just give us a few minutes for us to get going here. We're going to start with the Department of Planning. We're just having a few technical issues. Commissioner Keene, you there? Again, we're going to start with the Department of Planning in just a moment. We're just working through some technical issues here, trying to get the commissioner on the line.
Madam Chair, this is Tim Keene.
Good morning, Commissioner Keene. Sorry about the confusion, the numbers.
I apologize. I'll go ahead and get started. Thank you all for being here. Let me start by introducing those that are with me. Janet Sitapal, who's our Deputy Commissioner in the Department of City Planning, is with us. Greg Pace, who's the Director of the Office of Buildings. Joshua Humphreys, Director of Office of Housing and Community Development. Kieta Holmes, Director of Zoning and Development, and Kevin Bacon, who is the Director of the Office of Design. And I will go through, my presentation will be via these slides that were provided. And we'll go to the first slide, which is a summary of current operations. On this slide, what you see is our budget trend over a couple of fiscal years, our budget being between 20 and 25 million. Over the last couple of years, of course, in the current budget, we dipped just below $20 million. We're in the presentation today, I'll be speaking to what was initially in the budget, and then what we're proposing the budget would be in an amended version, which would be slightly more than what you're seeing here on fiscal year 22 proposed budget. Also, our different offices, as I mentioned, the distribution of our head count within the Department of City Planning, and some of the metrics that we track, and I'll get back to those later in the presentation. Next slide gets into a couple having to do with the current fiscal year accomplishments. They include the first in quite some time changes to the kiosk program that we think are going to substantially improve that program for small businesses, and also to get more active kiosks in downtown Atlanta. The West Side Affordability Overlay, which was council adopted recently and requires affordable housing around our new West Side Park. Public space work we did throughout the year, which included additional placemaking projects throughout the city and amendments to some regulations having to do with the use of streets, such that we could also recently install some parklets or outdoor dining within the right-of-way. We're working on amendments to the Comprehensive Development Plan. We'll make some of those this year, Plan A. That work will continue into next year, but we will make some progress in the current fiscal year. Atlanta City Design Housing, which you're all aware of, that was released late last year and proposes a number of different policy changes to help enable more affordable housing in the city as we grow. The Peachtree Street shared space in downtown Atlanta, which we've had a very public process around during the pandemic, and we'll begin phase one of that work here in about a month. Next slide. The food truck expansion, which went also through council fairly recently to expand the areas that food trucks can operate within the city. The new tree protection ordinance, which is before council committee right now. We introduced that several months ago. The impact fee update, which has already, of course, been through council, and the new impact fees will be in effect starting September 1st of this year. We did our first ever neighborhood change report to track how neighborhoods in a growing city are changing relative to incomes in Atlanta, which we think is a very important report for us to continually update as the city continues to grow and change. And the next slide, last slide, related to accomplishments this year, we had to quickly shift all of our permitting to online. Of course, when the pandemic began, previously all of our permitting was, for the most part, hard copy plans that people submitted, one-on-one interaction with customers. We had to very quickly, because construction was deemed an essential business, shift that to online, and we still have a long way to go to make that process work for people consistently. But you'll see in some numbers I'll provide in just a moment, we have had a very busy year when it comes to permitting. We just completed what it was a multi-year process to correct all of our property lines in the city, the cadastral mapping project, which is a very kind of technical thing that no one necessarily knows much about, but it will improve all of our processes because we'll have corrected property lines to facilitate all kinds of work that the planning department does. We've just begun in earnest the zoning rewrite, which, as you all know, has been long in coming. That process has begun. This year saw quite a few important historic preservation quite a few projects that resulted in progress when it comes to preservation, including the new Ponce Island Historic District, which we work very closely with that neighborhood to create, and then preservation of individual locations, including the Eagle and the Kodak building on Ponce, also the Freedom Fuller House, and other individual properties. The next slide gets into some of our numbers for the year, and this first one has to do with the number of permits that we issued. As I said, we shifted to online. We started the online process was really just emails and sharing files via the cloud. We then, through the help of Acela, got a system in place quickly. This was last summer. That was better than the email and file sharing system we had, but this Acela system that we have was never really intended to be a permanent system. And it has resulted in us being able to issue a lot of permits, but we acknowledge that we've had too many cases where people have gotten caught in the process and gotten frustrated by it. But if you look at the number of permits that we've issued in the current fiscal year, all of which was during the pandemic, you'll see that we actually have issued more standard permits than we did in the last fiscal year, most of which was pre-pandemic, and actually approaching what we did in 2019. The permits that are down are express permits, and the express lane was really is most valuable when we're doing the work in person. People could come to the desk and get their plans approved in 30 minutes. So the express group has less value in this environment. Of course, as we open City Hall again, the value of it will become apparent once again. But overall, for the current fiscal year, we're at about 92% of the permits that we issued last year. The next slide has to do with construction value, and this is an important one we track as well, just because this has to do with the scale of construction that we're approving. Of course, we're doing everything from high-rise buildings in Midtown to Home Addition in Southwest Atlanta and everything in between. But you can see here that we're projecting for the current fiscal year will be ahead of last year and approaching where we were in the busiest year in the city's history, 2019. The next slide gets into some other key metrics that I mentioned earlier in the presentation, including permitting and process improvement. We have quite a number of permitting related metrics that we track. Here's one of them. Inspections. Of course, during COVID, our inspections have been, especially at the outset of the pandemic, we've always had inspectors on the street, but at the outset of the pandemic, in particular, the review of third-party inspections is especially important, as well as video inspections. We'll maintain those techniques, even though we already have more inspectors on the street, and we'll shift to even more inspectors on the street as we reopen City Hall and things are getting, hopefully, past the pandemic. The code innovation and zoning reform, this has to do with just basically the handling of zoning variance cases and how long it takes one to navigate that process. The next slide, again, having to do with issuing permits, these out of the Office of Design for Historic Preservation, certificates of appropriateness, and how quickly we get to approving certain types of COAs that are administrative, how quickly we can do those. And then within the kind of community development side of things, the percentage of households within the city that are in proximity to fresh food, and that's something that we're working hard on and are proposing to increase fairly substantially in the coming fiscal year. You go to the next slide, we get into the budget, and I'm going to show you two slides that relate to this. One is this slide here, which is what was presented in the budget book that you have, and the slight increase, $300,000 or so increase that was in that budget. We've been speaking with the finance and everyone involved in the budget process to try to seeking to increase our budget slightly, given some priorities we've got for the coming year that I'll get into in just a minute. And the next slide gets into the proposed amended budget. So what you'll see here is, rather than a $300,000 increase, we're proposing about a $1.5 million increase, $700,000 of which would be for additional staffing, and $800,000 of which is for additional contract services. So again, the previous slide was what was presented in the budget book. This slide here is what we'll bring to you as an amendment to the budget to increase the DCP budget by 1.5 million people to, thinking of the population of the city, as I often do, $1.5 million to address some priorities for the coming fiscal year, which I'll get to in just a moment. Regarding the next slide, getting into the operational budget and some of those priorities, critical areas for the coming year include the implementation of the short-term rental program and additional capacity needed in order to, that will go into effect on September 1st, and we're gearing up in order to manage that program. Substantial increases in code enforcement, where one of the things that we learned, not that this wasn't pre-pandemic, but it became especially acute during the pandemic, was the recognition that we need substantially more code enforcement officers that can cover the city much better geographically, but also at different times of the day and weekend and so forth. And then vacant public land and housing policy related implementation. We presented to Council Committee recently the work analysis around public land and having the capacity to now implement on the Housing Innovation Lab and all the work needed to bring public land to use for affordable housing. Contract agreements. SAGES is our new electronic plan review system. As I said, we've been working with the SELA and the system they quickly put together during the pandemic. The system that we ultimately are seeking that will be much better for customers is the SAGES system. So that's included in our contracts as well as the SELA. We still have a SELA as a support for our permitting work, but SAGES is the electronic plan submittal program that we're getting ready to implement that will really improve the process for everyone. Selectron is the IVR system to help with inspections, scheduling, the open counter system, which we've had for a while, but we continue to use that helps people understand how they can follow the process of permitting and zoning and so forth. And then various supply costs that we've got in the planning department. Next slide just gets into, again, I won't belabor this, but some key priorities for the coming year. As I mentioned, the public land utilization for affordable housing. The short-term rental program will kick off here shortly. Continuation of the CDP update and completion of that in the coming fiscal year. The implementation of the new impact fees and improving that process and system. And then the next slide, other key priorities for the coming fiscal year, the implementation of a new tree protection ordinance and all that will mean. As I said earlier, the substantial expansion of our code enforcement team, the Housing Innovation Lab, which is in part to serve all of us that are in the affordable housing business and bringing more public land to utilization for affordable housing. And then continued work on online permitting to improve the system we have so it's less frustrating for our customers and our staff, but then also implementing SAGES, which is the ultimate system to improve online permitting. And that is my last slide, Madam Chair. So with that, the group of us can answer questions or elaborate on any one of these.
Thank you, Commissioner King. Colleagues, I am not seeing anybody with a hand raised, but okay, I do now. Councilmember Justin Hillis has a question.
Thank you, Chairman Ide, and thank you, Commissioner King, for the presentation. My question focuses on something you highlighted in regards to the enforcement side of DCP, right? When it comes to building code violations and also zoning code violations. And I know you mentioned that some changes have already been made, but if you could just highlight those changes we've made this fiscal year and kind of what this budget does going into the next fiscal year to expand on those efforts.
Yes. And I'll invite Greg to speak on this if you'd like, Greg, but I'll start, Councilmember Hillis, by saying that one of the biggest issues that we've got is just staffing. Having enough people to, you know Troy Smith, of course, who's an incredibly dedicated and highly qualified leader of the code enforcement group. He just doesn't have enough people to cover the city consistently. And so among the things we've done recently, and Greg and his team have really tried to find ways to supplement Troy's team so we can cover the city better. Got some help from the solicitor's office, for instance, a few months ago. But recently we've added, over the past 30 days, we've added 3 additional code enforcement officers to Troy's team. And we did that through the contract that we have with NOVA. As we were moving into that contract renewal earlier this year, we recognized we had a couple of areas that where we were really deficient in terms of staffing that they could help quickly. So we amended that when we had that contract renewal. We amended that contract such that they could bring on code enforcement officers as well. And so they brought on 3 over the past 30 days. We're adding a 4th through that contract in June. So we'll have 4 additional staff in that team, which is hugely helpful. However, Greg and Troy, they put together a plan for a truly well-operating code enforcement team, which includes not only better geographic coverage, but also coverage at off times, in the evening and on the weekends and so forth. And as a result of that plan that they put together, we are proposing to add, and this will take a little bit of time, but add 16 people to that team. And so that is what we believe is the kind of capacity we need to address the issues that you, council member, and other council members hear about related to zoning and building code violations. We need that kind of capacity in order to consistently do that. So the budget is proposing that increase for our staff, council members.
Thank you. Just for clarity, is that 16 in addition to the already planned 4 that you spoke about, or is that counting those 4?
Well, that is in addition, council member. That is in addition to those 4. But those 4 I mentioned, as I said, have been brought to us by NOVA. And the reason we did that was because we knew we could do it quickly through NOVA because we already had that contract in place. So we were able to get the 4 from NOVA. We'll have the 4th in June. But that contract will end, I think it's in January of next year. So while we're going to lose, potentially, we'll talk more about the contract with the third party to see, under what circumstances we want to continue that contract. But between now or this budget adoption and January, of course, we'll be able to do additional hiring and code enforcement. But the direct answer to your question, council member, is the 16 is in addition to those 4.
And those 16 will be in-house, right?
That's correct.
Correct. Okay. All right, that's all I have for now, unless Mr. Pace has anything to add.
I will add. Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay. This is Gregory Pace. I will add that we currently have on staff 7 enforcement officers, so this will be addition to those 7 we currently have on staff. So it'll be 16 plus those 7.
Okay, thank you for that. And that's all I have at the moment. Thank you. Thanks to both of you, and thank you, Chairwoman Hyde.
Thank you, Councilmember Hillett. Councilmember Howard Schutt.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Commissioner. Do you happen to know what the current balance is in the account into which Bureau of Buildings revenue flows?
Councilmember Schutt, I'm checking on that right now.
Okay, and if you can't find it right away, I imagine you'd be interested in that. I'm glad that your budget was adjusted. Now, when you term it a budget amendment, does that mean that change will be incorporated into the inevitable substitute that we'll end up voting on?
That's correct, Councilmember.
Okay. And I'm glad to see that one of the reasons, for the change is so that you can, perform all of the duties that we handed you as a result of our short-term rental policy debate. It's going to be, I think, kind of a double-edged sword. It's going to be a lot of work. It's going to be a lot of paperwork, a lot of checking. But then also, I think you're going to find yourself dealing with really, really, really high expectations, both from neighbors who have been beleaguered for years, and they're going to see this as a magic bullet. So am I right that this is going to be fully staffed from the get-go?
It will be staffed from the get-go. I think what you're expressing, Councilmember, is something that we share very, very much. This concern that expectations are going to be very high. So we are preparing for sufficient staffing to get the permits issued to those that will be seeking a permit for short-term rental. And once we get to September 1st, we should be in much better shape with regard to enforcement of the short-term rental ordinance. So I think you're absolutely right, and we felt strongly that in this proposed budget we had to have the personnel included that would allow us to hopefully meet those expectations that you're describing.
Okay. And then just to maybe clear up some lingering confusion, am I right that law, as well as your department, have agreed that in terms of somebody applying, that it's going to be restricted to the applicant's personal residence instead of what was discussed at one time, which is, the one you live in plus one other?
Well, I don't know that we have anybody from law on the call that could answer that question. My understanding was that it was the one that you live in plus one. However, of course, this ordinance did not change the zoning ordinance. So, where you're currently not permitted to operate a short-term rental, you will still not be permitted to operate short-term rental. I think in terms of expectations for me, council member, that's among the highest concerns. That you have a good understanding of this.
Well, as a policymaker who voted on it, I'm not sure I'm comfortable understanding the outcome as the bureaucracy is going to ultimately define it. And so I would encourage you to get with law, because the city attorney I've spoken with seems quite sure that it's more limited than perhaps some think it is. To change topics, where are we with the dreaded zoning code rewrite?
Well, we had a multi-year process to get a team engaged, a consultant team to lead us through that process. That procurement process ended, it must be more than 12 months ago, and the team that we brought on has begun the process, and so we are, council member, you can, for the first time, officially say it is underway.
All right. I was getting concerned that some of the original team members might have retired or died over the last couple of years.
We have not heard of that.
Okay. All right. That's it for now. Thank you. Look forward to your new numbers, and I understand the need for the increase. So good for you for getting it. Not a lot of all departments, I'm sure, would like to leave a winner, as you apparently have done. So thank you.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Shipp. Councilmember Joy Shepherd.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Commissioner King, I have a few questions for you. When you talked about the seller permit process, you said that it was moving pretty fast now, online permitting process. Is that correct? Is that what you said?
No, I never said that. I said the SLF, what I said was when we started the online permitting, we started with emails and file sharing. We then relatively quickly moved to an Acela system that Acela developed due to the emergency associated with the pandemic. That Acela system that they created was never intended as the permanent online permitting system. And it has got lots of issues with it that we're not happy with and that affect customers in negative ways. So we are working constantly on how to troubleshoot this existing Acela system so that we can get permits through the process. But the ultimate system that we are developing is called SAGES, and that will be a much more consistent and understandable way for people to submit for permits online. The SAGES system, the first customers that will use SAGES for will be townhouses, and then we're going to roll it out to other customers over time. the first customers that will get Sages will start the rollout of Sages within the next 30 days. But in the meantime, we're, as I said, constantly troubleshooting the Acela system that we have, given we've had to use it much longer than we expected, to try to unclog jams that occur for too many people as they're getting permits.
Okay, so I'm sorry, I misunderstood what you said. But let me go on to another question. And you are Mr. Pace to answer this for me. If someone comes in to get a permit for house, in terms of renovation of a house or whatever, how long typically does that take? Is that something that happens within, and if the plan is actually, they come in and submit the plan or however they do it, do we require inspectors to go out and look at the property itself, or is this just a plan that they come in and submit, and then once they get the plan, do inspectors go out and look at all these plans that people submit for building and renovations and all of that? How does that work?
Well, let me start by saying, when it comes to how long it takes, the things that we track relative to someone's submittal and how quickly we're moving, first of all, is how long, once someone submits a permit application, how long does it take us to give them our first set of comments? And so for each of our permit types, whether it's a house or a big commercial building, we tell you we will get our initial comments back to you within a certain number of days. So 5 days or 10 days. That's the first thing that we track. Then once we have the comments to someone, you know, how long it takes then is up to them. But the second way that we track things is that we say, in what percentage of cases are we approving those plans upon the second submittal? The reason this is important is because we want to be paying attention to the quality of the initial comments that we give people, and we want our plan reviewers to feel some investment in getting those plans approved no later than the second submittal. So we track that, and we you know, pre-pandemic, we were consistently above 95% of the plans would be approved upon the second submittal. The percentage of plans that are approved during the pandemic on second submittal has been more varied, more than we like. But those are the two ways that we track it, council member. And, you know, the overall time that it takes for someone has to do with a lot of variables, all of which we don't necessarily control. With regard to inspections, when the pandemic began, we immediately decided that we would direct our scarce inspections resources that we're doing on-site inspections to residential customers. So somebody who has a house and is doing an addition or some kind of renovation. So from the beginning of the pandemic, we have committed our on-site inspectors to be going to residential customers. And we have been concentrating our third-party inspections and video inspections on commercial customers, because commercial customers are better able to, for instance, hire third-party inspectors. A residential customer isn't necessarily. So now, of course, as the pandemic has gone on, we have more inspectors now doing on-site inspections. So the number of on-site inspections is more than third-party at this point. So one thing to remember about the third-party inspection is that if someone hires the third-party inspector to do an inspection on their building, when they submit that third-party inspection to us, our inspector has to review that third-party inspection and approve it. Typically, what that requires is a fair amount of back and forth between the private inspector. It isn't as though they give us the third-party inspection and we stamp it approved. We actually have to evaluate that third-party report to make sure that it does, in fact, meet the code. And you know, sometimes we approve it and sometimes we don't. Often there's a lot of back and forth. Sometimes our inspector actually has to go to the building to determine if the third-party inspection report that they're getting is, in fact, accurate. So you were speaking of residential customers, council member, and
So Commissioner, let me jump in right here. So let me get more specific to it. What I'm asking specifically is, if someone submits plans to you, what I think I'm hearing you saying is you all don't actually go out and look at those plans. When those inspectors, when they come in and submit their plans, you all never go out. You actually look at the plan, you go over it, you go through a process and say, change this, do that, do the other. At what point do you go out to the site and look at what they're building? Or even go out and look at what they're doing?
At various stages in the construction process. I mean, you have inspectors that go to the site if there's any kind of land disturbance, you'll have inspectors that go at the very beginning. You'll have inspectors.
So right there. So pretty much inspectors don't go at the very beginning at all. Is that what you're saying? Sometimes they do.
No.
Commissioner, can I chime in real quick?
Yeah, absolutely.
Good morning, Councilmember Shepherd. So what I think you're asking is, does an inspector go to the site prior to the permit being issued once plans have been submitted? If that is your question, the answer is no, unless it is a fire damage structure where someone's called requesting an inspection prior, but otherwise, no. The inspectors do not go and do not conduct an inspection until a permit has been issued for that property, and the contractor, homeowner, or whoever is in charge contacts the inspections office to request an inspection. Now, on another note, for new construction, there is a pre-construction meeting that is not with our department, though, that has to be conducted by watershed management. But our inspectors do not conduct an inspection prior to the issuance of a permit.
Okay, thank you. You answered, that's the question I was looking for, Mr. Pace. Now, again, but what you all also do, what I just heard you say also, is that you wait until the inspectors till the builders come out and says, okay, you all come out now and I'm ready for you all to inspect. And so that's when you all go out. You all don't just arbitrarily go out there on your own to see, well, let's see what's happening. There is not a time frame where you can say, based on this permit we gave them, this is when it should happen. Is there a process even at some point where you say, okay, based on this, let me go out and see if it's complete? Let me tell you why. Because what I'm finding in my district continuously is properties that are being built by predatory builders and developers who are literally coming in, renting those, buying properties, and they're developing these properties illegally. With permits, you all know this because I have actually, what I'm doing now in my community, I'm telling everybody, when you see a house going up or repairs done on the house, see if there's a permit in front of the house. Because what we're finding is, continuously in my district, is that, and I suspect it's all over the city, in certain parts of the city, that these developers and these builders are actually building things illegally. But what I also am concerned about is the process that we have in place to check that. So I have a case right now at 1800 Metropolitan Parkway where they literally are building on the creek, South River Creek. And you all have given them a permit to go ahead and build. They sent us a permit to you all saying that the building was burned down and we're going to rebuild. So that building sat there, and from the beginning, that building had sit on the creek. I had watershed to go out there last week. As soon as they saw it, they did a stop work order on the building saying they can't build this close to the creek. So, and I know you talked about grandfather clauses and all of this, but this particular location I've reported over and over again. They're putting in car repair. So I've actually seen them actually pour oil down into the creek. But when I'm talking to your department about it, they're saying, well, we sent them something that it showed that they're just going to be putting up some walls and this and that and other. Well, what they've done now is they built a brand new building next to that. No one has even came out and looked at it, because what you're all saying is they're waiting for them to call you back to ask them to come out and look. I found this process to be a little backwards to me, especially like what I see in terms of this trust system, or that y'all trusting that these developers and these builders going to come back. I see this as a weak link in our system. I really think we need to look at this better. I know of some cases in the city right now where people are asking, rebuilt their houses, and they go out and asking somebody to come in and inspect it when they're going to sell it. And they never got a CO, certificate of occupancy, from the city. And when they go out and do it, they found, oh my God, this whole back of the building was built wrong. The back of the whole building was built wrong. But I don't believe that we even looked at, that was not a process in place that actually talked about, we don't just need to trust that the builders don't build that, and then we're going to wait on them to come back to tell us, okay, we finished now. Come on out and look at it, because a lot of them don't even do that. So I'm just telling you all, we got some serious problems in our department in terms of this. We got a lot of junk and crap that's being built in my community or being rehabbed in my community that's wrong, and we need to look at it. And I'm glad to know you have more inspectors, but I also would ask that y'all maybe need to look at your building department to see if you need more building inspectors to follow through that process also. I really have some major concerns about that. In response.
I can hear somebody talking. Commissioner Keene, wait one second. If everybody who's not Commissioner Keene or Councilmember Shepherd can mute your phones, we're getting some background noise, please. All right, Commissioner Keene.
Well, I just, Councilmember Shepherd has been describing issues that relate to the building permit process and inspections, but also that relate to code enforcement. We have people that, the inspection process in terms of issuing a permit and then doing inspections throughout the construction process is a very standard process for inspections. But we do have people that don't follow the code, and that gets more onto the code enforcement side of things. And are we able to consistently ensure that people are building based on the plans that they've had approved, or finding cases where people don't even have a permit? So, and that is a constant struggle. I will acknowledge there's always room for improvement, and that's why we're proposing a pretty substantial increase in staff to address the code enforcement side.
So let me ask you a question. If you all increase the staff in code enforcement, the issue that I just talked about in terms of building permits, will code enforcement inspectors be actually looking at those particular cases also? Would there be a structured plan that says, okay, that after these building permits, at some point, if the permit is given, because I also see just a weakness right there. So will code enforcement be up under that umbrella also, or will it still be up under the building inspectors who wait on builders to come back and ask them, are y'all finished? So we're finished, y'all can come out and check it, because they don't do that. It's great the building inspectors don't go around our schools and look at problems where there's building permits with no building permits. But what about the ones where we go through a process and then you're waiting on the builder to come back and say, come in and inspect it? Who's looking at that? Will an inspector ever go back out there? Or will a code enforcement inspector go out there? How would y'all do a check and balance on that?
So I guess to be more succinct of how the process works, the inspections are done in phases once a permit is issued. In a lot of cases, and I'm not going to say every case, but there are cases where someone provides us with plans and tells us what they're going to build, and get out there and build something totally different, or start building something totally different. And when that occurs, during that inspection process, that building inspector will catch that and usually stops that job. And
during that inspection process, you said during that inspection process, what if they never call for an inspection process?
Say that again?
What if they don't call you for the inspection process? You said during the inspection process, you're saying that when the inspector come out there, when does the inspector go? Is it when they actually are finishing that? Are you assuming that they're going to call you and make the assumption that they're going to call you and make that happen?
historically that's always been the case, and that's the standard across the country.
What I'm saying here, Mr. Pace, is that that's not happening.
Council member, I would describe what you're describing here in terms of a case as a code enforcement issue, not a building inspection issue. If someone gets a permit and they're doing work on a property and that work is not within the scope of that permit, and they're not calling for inspections, they're just doing whatever they want to do, then that's a violation. That's a code enforcement violation. And so with better coverage, as we're proposing in this budget, we'll be much better able to find and prosecute code enforcement cases. The building inspectors are helping people through the construction process based on the permit that they were issued. Cases like this, where a builder is violating various codes, potentially, that is something to bring in our code enforcement team to address. And we just haven't had enough people to cover the city the way we need to, as you know.
Oh, okay. Well, I hear you all. I hope this works, but I'm just telling you, I still think that there may be something you need to look at a untested process and change it. I won't be suggesting that be in the budget hearing, but I have to encourage about it. But thank you. I'm hoping that what you're saying is going to work. That's all I have, Madam Chair.
All right. Thank you, Councilor Shepherd. I'm gonna call on Councilmember Overstreet, and then I have a question, and I'm going to go back and let Law answer Mr. Shook's question after that. And just watching the clock, we do have about 6 more minutes. I know we got a late start, so we can run a little bit over if we need to. And I'm going to just ask everybody one more time, please, everybody look at your phone right now. And if you're not speaking, put it on mute, because we're picking up people's conversations in the background. We really, really struggled with this last night, and it made for a difficult budget hearing. I can track people down and find out who it is, but I'd rather just ask everybody to put your phone on mute unless you are speaking. All right, Councilmember Overstreet.
Thank you, Chair Ide, and thank you, Commissioner Keene and your entire team for that detailed presentation. And my favorite part was the part where you spoke about your amendment that we're going to receive, your amendment to FY22 proposal, because, that's wonderful that we know ahead of time that we're going to already have an amendment, and I appreciate you for that. And so we can go into detail about your amendment like right away and not later on and be caught off guard, so this budget process can stay smooth. So thank you for that. But I want to echo Councilmember Shepherd, because I see quite a bit of that in my district also. So it's a real thing where I see cement walls pop up, and I'm real sure that no one has come down to the city in our permitting office to ask for a 6-foot cement wall to be on Campbellton or anywhere else. And so it does happen. And I am so glad that we're at least putting forth the effort to change that process where we're not knowing what's going up unpermitted, or when people change their plans once they've already asked for a permit. So they'll put the sign out as if they're in compliance, and then you see something go up and you're like, I'm sure that this wasn't on the permitting plans, and sure enough, it usually isn't. Right now, there is a full-blown website about a tiny house subdivision that's gone up on Campbellton, and we've checked into it. They've not done permitting for it. It's not zoned for it, and your office has been working with me on that. But and I thought that it was not going to happen, but they're full steam ahead still. So we have to stay diligent. We can't check once and consider it taken care of. Some developers just are not good actors, and they're not going to play by the rules. So we have to definitely check back again because it's time to check back on this next property that I was just speaking about with an unpermitted, unzoned project. We just have to stay diligent, and I'm glad that our budget is addressing that. We do have a shortfall and need to correct that because, you know, quality of life is everything. That's what I like about city planning is that it looks at the city in a scope that really is rooted in quality of life. And I appreciate that. So I want to make sure that we're doing our best by that because, you know, that's the most important thing to everyone, you know, whether they can afford to insulate themselves in a beautiful quality of life or whether they're really not able to afford that and dependent upon the city to make sure that we're following the rules and making sure all of our partners and developers and investors are following by the rules. And I do appreciate that your budget is addressing that because this is exactly where our need lies with making sure that our code enforcement is tight and we have processes in place that are making a list and checking it twice, 3 times if we have to, whatever it takes to keep people in compliance. So thank you.
And Councilmember, we agree with you completely. And just to provide a little bit more context around what you specifically described there, think about how busy the city is and how in demand Atlanta is. When you look at the permitting numbers that I shared with you, the scale of development in Atlanta, we've never had that in the city. And so we strongly agree with you, and that is why this budget amendment is being brought forward to address concerns that relate directly to what you're describing and Councilmember Shepherd described. So thank you.
Okay, thank you, Sarai. Thank you, Councilmember Overstreet. I am going to give Mr. Futrell a moment to clarify something for Mr. Shook, but I did want to follow up on how soon we're going to get to a better point with permitting and when we're going to get the new system in place, because it's been pretty overwhelming on my office, the number of folks that we are having to get involved in the permitting process. And, you know, it's for all kinds of reasons, but I think at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter what the reason is if the experience is that, you know, people are just having an incredibly frustrating time. I mean, I have to say, from my personal experience of trying to help my 80-year-old father get a building permit, it was about as easy and enjoyable as giving yourself a root canal. And we ran into these Acela issues where, you know, there was a delay. At the end of the day, the answer I got was, well, zoning review is done. It's going back to buildings, but Acela is broken and doesn't tell us that. And so it's up to the applicant to tell the city that the city's done with part 1 and is ready to move to part 2. So there's got to be a better way to handle that. And I think sometimes it gets pushed back on, well, it was the applicant's fault on something. But if our process is so difficult that so many applicants are having issues, then that's a problem also. So, and I appreciate your honesty on that, because I've gotten a little bit of conflicting answers of, you know, oh, no, there's not a problem, there's not a problem. There was a problem, but there's not a problem. I mean, I would say from the calls I'm getting at my office, there's still a problem. So when do you think, from a technology perspective and from a staffing perspective, you're going to feel comfortable that we are operating smoothly, Commissioner King?
Councilmember, completely agree with you. And, you know, we were, if you look at this over a longer period of time, had made a tremendous amount of progress pre-COVID. When COVID happened and we had to abruptly shift everybody to online, we've been struggling really since then. And And that includes the Acela system that we have, as you described, the trouble that provides for some customers and our staff. And my answer to your question is, there's a few answers to it. One is, some of it does have to do with staffing. We've gotten a lot of concerns about, you didn't describe one, but we've gotten quite a few concerns about how long the zoning part of the process takes. And we have recently added one additional plan reviewer in zoning, and we'll be adding 2 more in June. So part of it is staffing, council member, and we need to keep working on that and propose to do that in this budget.
And is that a hiring issue of finding the right people, or is it a funding issue of you? I mean, do you have vacancies you're trying to fill, or is it you need more positions, or both?
Well, it's both, but I think it's been more about the recruitment in the past than it has been about the funding. But I will say at this point, it is also about the funding, but we're proposing to rectify that in this budget that's before you. But I will say the recruitment is really hard too. And the 3 positions I just mentioned that we're adding that are related to zoning are coming through that NOVA contract. So, they'll be here as long as we're under contract with them, which currently expires next January. But we've got additional positions in the budget to address the shortfalls that we have within the permitting system, council members, because part of it is a staffing issue, no doubt. But the second part of the answer is the troubleshooting I'm mentioning related to the Acela system that we currently have. And when you go down this rabbit hole with the Acela system we have, it's quite a maze in terms of the things that we have to correct and do better on. And we're basically just working through a list of technical problems with the way the system works now, so that it will get better and less frustrating for people. So that's part of it. And then the third part of it is the ultimate SAGES system that is in our budget, and we've been working on. As I said, for the first customers, which will be townhouses, we expect that to get launched over the next 30 days, and then we'll widen that out to other customers. But in direct answer to your question, council member, how long? I think, our expectation is that we will see improvement kind of day by day here, because we're adding staff and we are doing this troubleshooting around Acela. But to get to a point where we feel really comfortable is going to be when we get the SAGES system out and we're using that system for at least our first set of customers, which would be 30 days. So give us a little bit of time to work through the launch of that new SAGES system. But certainly we're looking at improvements for everyone over the next several months. But as I said, given the staff improvements we're making and the troubleshooting we're doing on Acela, we should see day-to-day kind of improvements for people, and we'll be tracking that.
Okay, I appreciate that. And I understand the COVID-related piece. It also sounds like Acela tried to sort of find a business opportunity there to, offer a product for people going remote that was about a B- product. So, okay, well, just keep me in the loop on how that progresses. I am going to, we are about 6 minutes over, but I hadn't seen earlier that Jonathan Putel from Law had raised his virtual hand to respond to Mr. Shook. So if Mr. Shook would like Mr. Putel to respond now, I can do that, or you all can connect offline. What's your preference, Mr. Shook?
Yeah, thank you. I've been repeatedly knocked off the line. Ms. Robinson was kind enough to immediately, reach out to me, and so I'm comfortable knowing where we are. I really think it's important for law and planning to sit down to make sure that not only is everyone on the same page, but seeing it on the exact same key. So that can follow its course. Thank you.
Okay. Well, this has been a really full, productive hour, and I think you've gotten the sentiment from council members, Commissioner Keene, about the issues that we're seeing, out in the neighborhood. But thank you to you and to your team for all of your hard work. I do know it's been a difficult year with COVID impacted you all in a different way that everybody seemed to decide to remodel their home while they were home. So I know it's been a long, hard year for you all. As much as we are frustrated, we also are appreciative of the work that your team has done. So with that, I'm going to say thank you to City Planning, and we're going to jump without a break right into Finance so we can try to get back on our schedule. So the Department of Finance, we can find their presentation on page 200 of the budget book. I am going to say good morning to our Chief Financial Officer, Roosevelt Council. I believe he has all of his senior leadership with him. I'm going to let you introduce the team members that you have with you and are going to call on today, and then you can just start your presentation, Mr. Council.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. So this morning with me, I have Deputy CFO John Gaffney, also Deputy CFO Tina Wilson. I also have Revenue Chief Alicia Daniels, Budget Chief Charles Bell, Risk Manager Risk Management Director Jerry Deloach, and I have Lorette Woods, who is the Chief of our Administrative Services in the Office of Finance. So I'll jump right in, Madam Chair.
That's great. And I'll just make my PSA one more time. If people can put your phone on mute if you're not speaking, and also be aware that if you're watching it on Teams or on a screen, that you have that on mute when you're off mute, so we're not picking up the background playback, because I was getting a little feedback there. But yes, go ahead, Mr. Council. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Madam Chair. So this morning I would like to share the Department of Finance FY22 budget presentation. But before I get to the presentation, like others, I would like to extend my appreciation to the 144 women and men of the Department of Finance. A large part of what we do on a daily basis is to ensure that hundreds of vendors are paid. All the while, we're also preparing to pay over 8,000 employees every other week, as well as performing other functions that we engage in. So staff has been able to perform these daily tasks and other tasks diligently from home during this very challenging pandemic, never missing any deadlines or requests. This was made possible in large part due to the implementation of ATL Cloud, which has provided seamless access to the city payable and payroll systems. I also want to give a special thanks to staffers who come into City Hall once or twice a week to record the receipts of revenues that we receive via email. I couldn't be more proud of everyone in the Department of Finance. So moving to the first slide. The Department of Finance provides many services to the City of Atlanta, addressing the needs of internal as well as external customers. We continue to serve as a strategic partner, aligning financial and operational capacity with long-term city initiatives. Our core function requires that we manage and account for financial resources that ensure the highest level of legal compliance, controls, and transparency. And where possible, we have embraced innovative approaches that optimize the technology and business process solutions that provide efficiency and productivity and cost. Next slide. This slide depicts our department by the numbers. Our proposed FY22 general fund operating budget is $16.7 million, which has remained relatively flat compared to FY21. We have 156 authorized FTEs, with 144 of those FTEs filled. The Department of Finance has 6 functional offices and 2 administrative offices. The hexagon shown here represents each functional office, and the number inside the hexagon reflects their current staffing levels. But for each office, we also reflect an accompanying set of numbers that is relevant to the responsibilities of that office. Starting with our revenue office led by Felicia Daniels, its responsibility is to provide revenue budgeting, forecasting, and collection. The treasury function, led by Johnny Watson, is responsible for all cash management as well as debt management. The controller's office, led by Yolanda Carr, is the heartbeat of this department, and it manages general accounting, accounts payable, payroll, financial reporting, and the annual financial audit. The budget office, led by Charles Bell, assists in the development of the annual budget, develop operating budget policies and procedures, and ensure compliance with the adopted annual budget. Financial systems is led by Alfonso P9, that works, and this department works as a technical and business liaison between the department's business units and finance to improve financial management business processes and reporting. This office is also responsible for the ATL Cloud enhancement and training. And lastly, the Office of Risk Management, which is led by Jerry DeLoach. Its goal is to minimize the financial burden to the city and by extension its citizens as a result of fortuitous or accidental loss which the city is exposed to, and is to also protect the assets, operations, and employees of the city from losses that may arise from vehicular accidents, physical damage to property, and injury in the workplace. Next slide. So a lot of our focus in FY21 was to continue to identify areas where efficiencies can be realized. So our FY22 key accomplishments reflect some of those efforts. I won't cover all of these, but I will hit on the ones that I think are just as important. And we have implemented 100% electronic pay for payroll and thus have eliminated paper check payment. We have developed the processes for oversight and compliance monitoring of federal funds received in response to COVID-19, including tracking expenditures, eligibility, and reporting. We have also implemented a cloud-based certificate of insurance document management program, converting paper documents into an electronic format. These modules are nearly fully developed, and we expect this to be completed by July 1st of this year. We've also implemented an electronic inventory management system in ATL Cloud to track all of the COVID PPE inventory that the city has received. We've also refinanced $364 million in aviation bonds and $505 million in watershed bonds to lower the annual debt service payments for each. We've also implemented ATL Cloud financial dashboards for executive leadership in the city departments to review agent invoices and their trends. And finally, we've successfully completed the FY20 financial and pension audits, receiving an unmodified opinion from KPMG. Next slide. As we continue to address the impact of the pandemic on the city's financial resources, there are several measures, as you know, that have been put in place to allow the city to closely monitor that impact on a monthly basis. In addition, there are federal stimulus reporting requirements that must be adhered to. This slide reflects those measures and reporting requirements, which include the monthly revenue report to FEC, monthly budget reviews with the departments to review their spend from one month to the other, the monthly CFO COVID-19 report to FEC, and the various stimulus funds that the city has and will receive that requires federal reporting. All of that is being led by the risk manager, Jerry DeLoach, who is responsible for the cost and recovery aspect of the COVID-19 effort for the city. Next slide. So looking ahead, there are several initiatives that we're looking to get underway in FY22. We will be looking to improve and restructure the OSIP program at the airports. We are looking to implement a small business surety program to increase opportunities for small businesses to engage in the work also at the airport. We'll also provide monitoring and compliance, continue to provide monitoring and compliance oversight for the city's financial response to COVID-19. We will also be implementing GASB 87, which is an accounting and financial reporting requirement for leases by government. We will also implement new automated processes for accounts payable contract retainage. Also develop a control structure working with the Department of Human Resources to improve the process for analyzing group health expenses. We will also expect to refinance approximately $320 million in aviation bond and commercial paper. And finally, we'll have multiple ATL cloud implementation of modules and tools to further improve and enhance that efficiency. Next slide. So our budget for FY22 has remained relatively flat compared to FY21. So there is a $435,000 increase. And most of that increase is to fund the incremental increases in health benefits and pension, as well as to fund some vacancies that were defunded in error in FY21. Our personnel budget represents 75% of the department's total budget. Purchase and contract services include contracts with Iron Mountain, which provides document storage services for the city, Willis Tower Watson, which is the city's insurance broker, Wells Fargo, as well as an arbitrage agreement, as well as Mythics, which is an Oracle provider, and Xerox. Supplies include office and copier supplies and software licenses. Our interfund cost includes costs for motor fuel usage and vehicle maintenance and repairs for the fleet department, and these fleets are located in the Department of Revenue for a lot of their field audit work. Other costs include bank charges, credit card charges, and business meeting expenses. And other finances uses include GMA costs for that Department of Finance fleet that I just mentioned. And Madam Chair, that completes our presentation. We are open for questions.
Thank you so much, Mr. Counsel. Colleagues, I don't see anybody's hand up yet. Does anybody have questions on the finance presentation? All right, this is your opportunity while Mr. Counsel is before us. I am not.
Yeah, I'll just make a comment.
Yeah.
I'll just make a comment. You know, the budget's pretty straightforward. Okay. I appreciate all the work finance does. I think y'all have developed a really good bench over the last several years, and that we're all the beneficiaries for it. The timeliness and quality of the information we get it can't even be compared to my first couple terms, and that's a huge difference maker. How would you describe this year's budget process? Was it any different? I mean, you know, I'm sure you had all sort of gotten used to working with Mr. Bartley, who is back in New Zealand. Yeah. Describe the budget process, and you know, was it any different?
Yeah. It wasn't really any different, Councilmember Shook. Given that we had somewhat of the experience for FY21 as it pertains to COVID. You know, I mean, there's a pretty structured way that we actually do this budget. You know, we generate the anticipations for the year or the revenue for the year, and then we look at trying to fit a budget within those numbers. But of course, COVID changed that landscape completely. You know, it forced us to actually look at other sources of revenue to be able to still fund the departments at a level that would still allow them to perform the services that they have to perform. You know, I think that what I think I missed with Mr. Bartley was, you know, his impact in terms of transitioning the mayor's initiatives, you know, into a quantifiable amount. And of course, there was always some pull and tug, you know, between how we would actually balance that budget. You know, but we always appear to have been able to reconcile any differences. It was, again, some give and take. You know, but I think that what's more important is that my point to the mayor's office was that we wanted to try to remain as solvent as we can in light of the challenges that we have with the pandemic. And I really appreciate the fact that they took that to heart. You know, but at the same time, we wanted to make sure that we maximize what services we needed to provide to the city as well. And so but I counted Matt, as someone that he and I used to spend time together talking about certain strategies. But the process itself, only changed slightly, and the change was driven more so, by the impact of COVID. But I would say that it moved pretty smoothly.
All right. Well, excuse me. Yeah, I'm sorry Mr. Bartley was extradited back to New Zealand. However, to the extent that Mr. Bala was thrown into the breach, looks like things moved pretty smoothly. I do think it needs to be said because, we live kind of in the moment here. A year ago, when we were trying to figure out a budget, when things were much less certain than they are now, and now it looks like we're kind of roaring back. Boy, a year ago, all bets were off. And your budget, I think, ended up really reflecting, the facts and how it played out. And so I don't want that to go forgotten. But thank you. I'm done.
Thank you, Councilmember.
Thank you, Councilmember Shuck. Colleagues, anyone else have a question for Mr. Council? All right, hearing none, thank you so much for the presentation. Mr. Council, thank you to you and your team for everything you do. I certainly find you all invaluable in doing my job on Finance Executive Committee, and you've done a tremendous job of keeping the ship righted during the last year, and I'm confident you will going forward as well. It is 11:24. We're going to take a 36-minute break, and we're going to come back right at noon with the Department of Law. So to the public, the line is going to go quiet, and we're going to come back on a minute or two before noon, and we'll start right up on the hour. Thank you, everybody, and see you at 12.
This is our annual Eco Depot. We do this once a year out here at Charm. We used to do it at Turner Field, and we did it one year, the very first year we did it at the Civic Center. But this is an annual day where you can get rid of those unwanted, but the things that you know your gut says, don't throw this away, but I can't put it in the garbage and I can't put it in the city's recycling blue bin. So this is the Center for Hard to Recycle Materials. So people are out here today, they're bringing their styrofoam, they're bringing their tires. We've got neighborhood tires that are coming, where someone dumped them. We've got tires that are coming. All of your old electronics, just like when you have that old electric toothbrush that died, your old cell phone that died, you know better than to put it in the trash or the recycling. So you bring it out here to Charm. It's in the springtime, which is so proper for spring cleaning, because then you don't throw out that old paint can that's got paint in it. You don't throw out whatever the Raid bottle that you lost the lid to. You can bring them here and we will properly dispose of them. And everybody is showing up. We've got, the outpouring of people coming out to recycle their items properly is just amazing. Look at all these people. I'm so happy.
A native son of Atlanta, C.T. Martin was educated in Atlanta public schools, graduating from Booker T. Washington High School. Martin would attend Shaw University in North Carolina before returning home to earn a master's degree from Atlanta University. Martin was quick to answer the call to community service. The years 1979 through 1981 were dark and troubling times in the city, and a young C.T. Martin stepped forward to serve on the Missing and Murdered Children's Task Force. In 1990, Martin's activism led him to City Hall as he was elected to Atlanta City Council, representing the city's 10th district for the first time. It was the beginning of one of the longest tenures on record for a council representative. Martin served on the City Budget Commission and chaired committees for human resources, public safety, and transportation. His passion for economic development in his district led to the formation of the Martin Luther King Jr. Drive Merchants Association. The ongoing reimagining of the MLK corridor is part of Martin's legacy. C.T. Martin left City Council in 2017, the same year that the $27 million Natatorium and Recreation Center in the Adamsville community was renamed in his honor. It is an enduring symbol of C.T. Martin's commitment to the youth as well as the seniors of the 10th District. C.T. Martin passed away May 8th at the age of 84. He will be remembered as an activist, visionary, and mentor, but most of all, C.T. Martin will be remembered as the Dean of Atlanta City Council.
We're out here downtown today celebrating the completion of 4 projects that were voted on during our Downtown Decides participatory budgeting process. And we're riding a bike from one location to the other to do a ribbon cutting at each of the 4 transportation projects. Some of the projects we're celebrating today are new bike lanes in the Central Business District, the painting of an island in the middle of the road yellow so people can see it, and some new trash cans in the Sweet Auburn corridor. This is the direct result of citizens participating in this program. This is the first time we've done participatory budgeting in Atlanta, and it puts the power directly in people's hands on how tax dollars are spent, and we're just thrilled with the response and the success of the program so far.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. Apologies, I was a minute late or so. This is Councilmember Jennifer Ide, and we are, it is 12 o'clock on Wednesday, May 19th, 2021, and we are right in the middle of Day 5 of the City Council review of the Mayor's proposed fiscal year 2022 municipal budget. This morning we covered city planning and the Department of Finance. We're going to start back up with law in just a moment. Colleagues, if you want to go ahead and turn to the law presentation, it's on page 176. Our budget materials for the listening public. All of the budget materials are available electronically. If you go to the Atlanta City Council website, go to the Finance Executive page, and there's a tab there that says Proposed Fiscal Year 22 Budget, and you can find today's presentations as well as the presentations that have already been completed on that page. At the completion of each topic, council members will be able to ask questions, so please send me a message if you have a question, and I will get to you. Let me see who I have been joined by today. I believe that I have my Vice Chair, Councilmember Howard Shook. We have Council President Felicia Moore on the line, Council Member Joyce Shepard, Councilmember Marcy Collier Overstreet, Councilmember Dustin Hillis, Councilmember Antonio Brown, Councilmember Andrea Boone. And with that, I'm going to welcome our City Attorney, Nina Hickson. Ms. Hickson, feel free to introduce other team members that you have with you, and then you can just start your presentation after that. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chairperson Ide, Council President Moore, other members of council, members of the public. Thank you for this opportunity to present this afternoon the proposed budget for the Department of Law for fiscal year 22. Present with me are Ezekiel Frazier, Managing Deputy City Attorney, Kimberly Patrick, Deputy City Attorney for Operations, Bashir Bailey, our Finance and Budget Director, and Ty White, who is our Business Manager. We appreciate the support that has been rendered to the Law Department over the past 3 years. I've been in the seat since May of 2018, and I'm appreciative of the support shown by both the administration and the City Council during that time. At this time, I'd like to publicly express my sincere appreciation to the team. You have a committed group of public servants who have worked quite hard over the past 3 years, but particularly the last 15 months, to continue to provide quality service to the city of Atlanta, whether that's continuing to try cases, coming in to actually accept service of cases, to actually get the mail, to continue to provide and respond to the various document requests we receive from the various federal agencies, preparing emergency orders as a result of COVID, making sure that we've been in compliance with the CARES Act as well as the American Rescue Plan. The activities of the Law Department have continued, notwithstanding the fact that we have been out of the building and have had to do so remotely. So I want to thank those committed public servants in the Law Department who continue to do great work on behalf of this great city. I again would direct you to page 176 of the budget book, which is where our presentation begins. We could go to slide number 1. I would like to highlight a few of the accomplishments over the past fiscal year, and I will keep this brief. This is not a comprehensive list, but we made some promises last year, and I wanted to follow up on some of those promises. One of the things that we managed to do in fiscal year 21 was to identify training needs for client departments and provide very targeted training. So, for instance, we were able to do procurement law training not just on behalf of the procurement department, but we also provided that training for the Department of Aviation, Watershed, AIM, DEEM, and Finance. As relates to the Department of Aviation, we provide targeted training in the area of intellectual property or trademark. We also have streamlined our contracting process and provided trainings in those regards. Additionally, we were successful in reducing the number of cases that have been outsourced. The litigation team this year outsourced fewer personal injury cases than we did in fiscal year 20, meaning that 88% of our personal injury cases were handled in-house. The litigation team was also able to outsource fewer of our employment cases, with 56% of the employment cases being handled in-house as opposed to being outsourced. This has gone along with our efforts to reduce outside legal costs by also renegotiating our rates with the law firms that we've used. We've also made a deliberate effort to employ more women and minority-owned firms, which has worked to the benefit of the city. Additionally, we engaged in proactive revenue recovery. So far in fiscal year 21, we have recovered a total of $1.5 billion. We also indicated we would do our best to reduce the costs related to the Department of Justice investigation. And so this year we have seen a 68% reduction in the outside counsel costs related to responding to the Department of Justice investigation, which continues to this day. Probably one of the items I'm most proud of is our installation and use of a document management system. As you know, in March of 2018, as a result of the cyber attack, we lost years of documents, templates, just all kinds of documents that we've had to recover, but we also had to put in a document management system because we lost what we had. And so we were able to identify the legal file system, actually install it and begin to use it, and we have experienced many efficiencies as a result, and have actually been able to share our success and access to other departments who are looking for document management systems. We also have been able to, even as a dual report, meaning the city law department reporting to the executive and administrative branches, we have worked continuously at increasing our level of transparency without compromising the attorney-client privilege or the confidentialities of our clients. And so in addition to our quarterly public safety and legal administration reports, we also have been providing executive session reports on pending litigation on a monthly basis. Next slide, please. The Department of Law is proposing a flat budget of $12,036,203 for contract agreements and outside counsel, as well as a flat budget of $80,000 for supplies and other costs in fiscal year 22. Next slide, please. As it relates to our personnel deployment strategy, the proposed budget, as referenced in the budget book on page 184, indicates a total FTE of 113. These numbers do not accurately reflect what the Department of Law's proposed budget numbers are, or the FTE. The FTE reflected in the budget book include 19 extra help positions, all of which will be eliminated once the personnel paper has been approved. And so the Department of Law headcount will be 98 FTE. Let's move to the next page. Next slide. In terms of the general fund fiscal year 22 proposed budget from the Department of Law, the budget summary indicates that the proposed general fund fiscal year 22 budget will be $6.8 million. That reflects
60.6% being allocated to salaries, 38.8% being allocated to purchase or contract services, which is primarily outside counsel, $30,000 or 0.4% allocated to supplies, and 10% for contingency. This proposed budget is a reduction of 2.5% from the fiscal year 21 budget. Next slide, please. We want to point out in terms of the general fund purchase contract professional services, which is primarily outside counsel, the purchase contract services line for the general fund, at least over during my time, has been underfunded and has never correlated with what the prior year experience has been. Over the years, we have relied partially on the non-departmental to address the shortfall in the outside counsel. We don't think this is a sustainable or good practice, and it is our hope that in the future, the general fund budget as relates to outside counsel will be more reflective of what our past experiences have been. But on a positive note, I can report that this year we have seen a decrease in our outside counsel spending as it relates to the enterprise fund, and that's been due in large part to our ability to handle a number of cases in-house as opposed to having to outsource those cases. Next slide. Finally, as it relates to the present state as well as the future of the Department of Law, I believe that there's been a lot of progress made over the last 3 years in our efforts to reach the desired state of having an effectively staffed and efficiently operated Department of Law. However, to continue on this path, there's some considerations that have to be made and some things that we need to at least bring to your attention. Regardless of who sits in the seat of city attorney, it is important that the Department of Law is one that has some level of employee stability, as well as the ability to retain institutional knowledge and memory. As it relates to the current work staff, I have to again reiterate my appreciation for all of the work that the employees have done, notwithstanding the fact that we are finding ourselves in a position where it is difficult to recruit as well as to retain attorneys because in a large sense our salaries are not competitive. And I will just give you an example. Recently in one of the smaller cities in the metro Atlanta area, they were advertising for 2 attorney positions. And the salaries that they were advertising for 4-year lawyers are consistent with what we find ourselves paying lawyers who have spent 20 years in the profession here in the city. This, of course, is not going to be sustainable if we want to have a stable law department and one where we're not expending inordinate amounts of money on outside counsel. When we lose talented people who want to do public sector work, and that's what we're finding, that those who are with us but end up leaving, or those who even want to come into the department, are people who are really dedicated to doing local government work and enjoy the work. However, the salaries, because they have not kept up, has caused difficulty with us recruiting as well as retaining really valuable employees. And so in the best interest of the city, it's an issue that's going to have to be dealt with. And now, while there is not a proposal for this year, it would be our hope that next year that there will be some effort made toward getting salaries competitive so that we can retain good workers. I'm going to defer to my managing deputy attorney at this time to see if there's anything she wishes to add to our discussion in that regard.
I don't have anything additional. I think we are prepared to answer any questions that the members of City Council have. Madam Chair, that concludes our presentation, and we are ready for questions.
Thank you so much, Ms. Hickson. I do want to recognize that Councilmember Matt Westmoreland joined us right at the start of your presentation. I had missed him. Colleagues, any questions for our City Attorney, Department of Law?
Madam Chair, Matt Westmoreland. I'm not on the system, but I'll ask a question.
Sure.
To the City Attorney, I'd frankly like to pick up where you just left off. Could you talk a little bit more about understanding the constraints that exist with this fiscal year's budget, but as we look to the future, what were those numbers that where a neighboring peer city was offering for a four-year lawyer what we are paying someone who's been here 5 times as long?
If you don't mind, I'm going to defer to the managing deputy attorney who is handling this on a day-to-day basis and give you the numbers. Good morning, council members and Councilmember Westmoreland. Thank you for your question. So the number for those positions that were advertising for 46 lawyers were between 90,000 and 140,000. We generally can't even offer $100,000 to our potential candidates who come to us for employment, and with a combination of salaries, of positions that we've lost. When people have left, we've been able to increase the salaries internally for people who have been with us for that period of time. But again, it's just at that six-figure level. I think it's important to talk about what we're offering as beginning lawyers, because most lawyers coming out of law school are coming out maybe at $90,000 to $100,000. So we're offering our beginning lawyers $70,000. So there's a big gap in terms of what people offer. And to further give you some additional information around that, so our salary range to offer is between 70 and 115 in terms of the positions that we have. And if you're just looking at other public sector jobs for attorneys, their range starts at 90 to 100 and goes upward.
Okay, that's all helpful. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Councilmember Westmoreland. Anyone else have questions for the Department of Law? I am not seeing anybody else with their electronic hand raised. Colleagues, anybody who's not on the system, just speak up if you have a question. All right, well, thank you, Ms. Hick. Yes,
ma'am. Yeah, the only thing that I wanted to ask is if, I'm the outside counsel, if we could get, sort of a comprehensive report since the term to see, how much we've expended. I don't know. I'm not in front of my computer, so I don't know if that was provided, but if it isn't, is that something the city attorney could provide?
Yes, I believe one of our charts provided it, but in addition, we can certainly provide that. Again, the amount in the general fund was approximately $5,700,000, but we in the enterprise fund we've experienced a reduction in that regard.
Okay. So, whatever you can provide, that will be helpful, and thank you all.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Council President. All right, then we are going to go on pause for about 35 minutes.
And we will be back at 1 o'clock for our final two sessions with our employee unions. We'll have Ask Me and then at 1 and PACE at 1:30. So again, thank you to the law department. Thank you to everything that you do to keep the city running smoothly. And for colleagues who were not here today, they do have a copy of your presentation, and so they may be following up offline. All right, with that, we're gonna go on pause until a few minutes before 1, and then we'll pick up for our final two presentations then. Thank you.